We welcome you back to this episode of the People's Mirror. Now, there has been this talk of rift occurring between the Mount Kenya East and the Mount Kenya West, and it is boiling up a little bit much nicely ahead of the major polls in 2027, with a section of Mount Kenya West members feeling like power needs to return back to Mount Kenya West. This section includes members who come from the counties that include Kiambu, Kirinyaga, Nyandarua, Murang'a, and sometimes Laikipia, and members from the Mount Kenya East, including now members from Tharaka Nithi County, Embu County, and Meru County, feels like they have spent a lot of time in their last political lives supporting the mountain only if that support is based on the West, and now they feel that it's time for the West to also return this particular favor that certain leaders have said has existed for a period of over 60 years. Now they expect the West to return this favor rather to the East, with the Mount Kenya East being supported not only in this current administration where Kindiki is currently the deputy president, but also in the subsequent elections and more. Now this particular conversation has been heated so much that recently statements were made, including statements that were made by CS Ruku, that shows a likelihood of dividing this mountain that has previously been voting as a block. That story is what we are going to measure on today in this particular episode of the People's Mirror. But then other than that, we'll also take a look briefly at Sifuna defending Kalonzo now from this sequential statements of attack that has been taking place between President William Ruto and Kalonzo in the recent past, and this particular celebration that had Gideon Moi and Uhuru Kenyatta sitting together, and the political statements that came out of that. If this is your first time with our channel, please hit the subscribe button. We are just about 170 subscribers shy out of 2000, and if you hit the subscribe button, then you can also help us reach that particular milestone. But beyond that, hitting that subscribe button gives you an opportunity to find information on what goes on in the Kenyan political scene as it unfolds, because that is what we do here at the People's Mirror. You can also comment down there to let us know your thoughts on what is happening in the Kenyan political scene, and even what you'd want us to recap on that you've seen occurring in the Kenyan political scene. You can share with your friends and you can like. That way we grow each other. Now let's start with this main story. Mount Kenya for quite some time has been known to vote as a unified bloc. This is dated back to some time that even voting was not such a major consequence, as much as early as rather the first time that the democracy of this country was being coined around the hand of the black man. And so when Kenyatta took it to power, Kenyatta of course hailed from Gatundu, which is part of Kiambu, that is part of the western part of Mount Kenya. And later on in this episode, we will show you how even Kiambu itself now wants to distance itself not only from the west and east kind of conflict, but from Mount Kenya as a whole. Now this founding father of the nation comes from the Mount Kenya West part as per the current arrangements, and specifically from Gatundu, Kiambu, and then serves for quite some time like he did. And then once on, now the democracy has kind of matured in the 2002s, when now there is a second liberation rather from the hands of Daniel Moi to a more spacious democratic space. Kibaki is also supported holistically with both the Mount Kenya East and West. Kibaki was coming of course from Nyeri, Hodai of course in Nyeri County, which is also categorized in Mount Kenya West section, and so he received overwhelming support of the mountain for the years that he served as the president of Kenya. Then Kibaki hands it over again to the son of Kenyatta, the first president, the founding father. And of course, because his father was hailing from Kiambu, he definitely was also hailing from Kiambu. So this goes back again to Mount Kenya West. Now, Rigathi Gachagua's leadership as the deputy president in the first ambit of Ruto's government was also seen as power being centered from the Mount Kenya West section. So much that when this particular rift occurred, some statements that were made by Rigathi Gachagua included the fact that Kindiki was not from the mountain, just because of how overwhelmingly from the past the mountain has been referred to only if it includes these particular communities and counties that identify with Mount Kenya West. Now, since that has since dwindled and power has transiently changed, and of course power is like energy, it cannot be destroyed, it can only be transformed from one source to the other. So now it has been transformed within the mountain area from Rigathi Gachagua's deputy presidency to Honorable Kithure Kindiki's deputy presidency, and here is where hell breaks loose. Certain individuals have taken a look at this particular shift within Ruto's government as a move by President Ruto himself to actually delineate the influence of the Kikuyu community specifically as part of the Mount Kenya West influence. And this has been discussed to length, with individuals saying that taking power from the dominant Mount Kenya West takes away the influence of the Kikuyu vote in the general ballot, and so transferring this power within the same mountain to the east first puts the mountain at a fight, which divides these votes at the favor of the person that has shifted the power to the east, number one, but number two, also gives the smaller communities a taste of power, and with it comes a taste of voice of wanting to now argue and advocate and debate rather for their interests in the national table moving forward. That also has a direct influence on interfering with the centered Kikuyu vote. So most political fanatics have taken a look at it and have said this particular power shift within the Ruto's administration was intentional to actually shift and actually reduce the influence of the Kikuyu vote in the 2027 ballot. But others have said that it was inevitable. It came as a result of the infight between President Ruto and his deputy president then, Rigathi Gachagua. And so when the members of parliament, the way Mr. Ruto himself puts it, Dr. Ruto rather puts it, that when the members of parliament also felt attacked by this deputy president that was making it very hard for president to disseminate his duties, then the members of parliament themselves decided to ouster Mr. Gachagua. And so as a result of that, Kindiki landed in that particular position. Others who are independent of these two schools of thoughts have also said that prior, this particular position might have been Kindiki's, and because of certain political arrangements when they were getting into the power dynamic of 2022, it went to Gachagua, and so it falling back to Kindiki was actually the rightful approach to it from the beginning. Now, that notwithstanding, because that is now in our past, we are looking at the present and the future. The conversation around this mountain is now that the Mount Kenya East part that houses Kindiki and Ruku and Cecilia Mbarire, some key players in the United Democratic Alliance Party right now, feel like this particular region of the mountain needs to identify independent of the Mount Kenya West part. Cecilia Mbarire, who is also doubling as the chairperson of the UDA party, was quoted saying that for quite some time they have defended the interest of the west part of the mountain. For sometimes they have defended the interest of the west part of the mountain. This, she said, could be pictured from the overwhelming support that the mountain gave the first administration, being the Kenyatta's administration, and the voting bloc that the east and the west did when it came to Kibaki's two-term presidency, and of course the same overwhelming support that the east gave the west when it came to this particular support of Uhuru Kenyatta's bid. And now they say that with Rigathi Gachagua out of the picture, Cecilia Mbarire believes that it is time for the west part of the mountain to now support not only this administration that has Kindiki in it, but even the subsequent administration in 2027, if that administration will still have Kindiki in it. Ruku, who is the former member of parliament for the hotly contested Mbeere North by-election that we saw recently, and also currently the cabinet secretary for public service and human resource in the current Ruto government, I say that even if it comes to splitting this particular particular mountain into two, then so be it. Because he says it's time for the Mount Kenya East to actually liberate themselves from the Mount Kenya West dominance, saying that in the other camp, Rigathi Gachagua has planted hatred, and that is not a hatred that they actually want to identify with, saying that that hatred is aimed at the very government that is now centering resources to the mountain and Mount Kenya East. Other statements on the sideways have been that they feel that in the recent administrations, Mount Kenya East has been sidelined when it comes to development and resource allocation, with these resources and development being centered only for the Mount Kenya West part. So this particular talk of division has not been taken positively, both by elders from the Mount Kenya East and certain political candidates from the Mount Kenya West. Now let's start with Mount Kenya East and why certain individuals do not support the Ruku Mbarire move. Before the by-elections in Mbeere North, we detailed here very categorically that one of the wars that was happening at that very Mbeere ground was the fact that who was going to become the kingpin post these particular elections. And so the UDA party winning gave an upper hand to Honorable Geoffrey Ruku to actually replace the over-domineering influence that has been created in this area by both Senator Lenny Kivuti and of course Honorable JB Muturi. But as it turns out, JB Muturi still holds his ground somehow, and Ruku is still trying to create his ground somehow. But that notwithstanding, from the Mount Kenya East part, including from the Honorable former CS Linturi, these elders have said that the statements being made by Ruku are devoid of looking at the future. They're saying that there are statements that are being made centered on the current political environment and tension in the country, and so this might not exist into the far future. And so dividing an entire mountain right now just because of the political situations in the country is a little bit insensitive to certain of leaders from the Mount Kenya East. Linturi, who was quoted actually replying to Honorable Ruku, has since said that Honorable Ruku has been paid certain millions to support Ruto's government, but that has kind of gotten to his head to the level that he now wants to divide the community that has historically been together based on that particular pay. And so he says that it is not a good call to divide the community based on political arrangements currently, because the community goes beyond the current government. So that is some of the feedback that has come from Mount Kenya East. JB Muturi has not made an express statement on this one. But when we look at the Mount Kenya West side, Rigathi Gachagua is actually very against this idea of dividing the mountain. The reason why Mr. Gachagua has been attacking directly Cecilia Mbarire is because of the fact that he believes that Mbarire is actually championing a division within the mountain that is unwarranted. And so Mr. Gachagua is not of the idea of the mountain being divided with Mount Kenya East going their way and Mount Kenya West going their way. He feels like this division is coming as a result of Ruto's move to infuse the votes in this particular area and divide them ahead of 2027, so that the mountain does not vote as a block for the first time in 2027. So a comment is here. Prior to this particular debate, and we'll take a deeper look at it in a few. You remember sometimes back we talked about over 12 to 14 parties coming out of the Mount Kenya region and looking into the 2027 arrangement, all of them having interest or wanting to have a negotiating power in the national table independent of Rigathi Gachagua's position as the mountain key holder. And so we talked about individuals like Jimmy Wanjigi, who had openly said that they might not really be boarding that particular ship. We talked of people like Peter Munya, who also had felt like this was not their way to 2027. Of course, other party leaders like Kabogo are already in the Ruto government with their parties. And so this particular deviation and division rather within also the mountain of this particular political parties and their political leaders wanting to negotiate independently could be the reason why now the mountain is dividing. Because from the eastern side, Ruku and of course the Deputy President Kindiki Kithure wants to have their own domineering influence independent of identifying with Rigathi Gachagua. Rigathi Gachagua main game in the 2027 major polls is to unify the mountain and deliver it as a block to whoever will be in his camp. And so these are the challenging stories that are now coming out of that particular approach, because from the west side they feel like it's their right to consolidate the mountain together ahead of an election, because because that is what the mountain has been doing previously. But from the east side, they feel like this is their first taste into power, and actually they've realized that power is sweet, and they have a negotiating power of their own to actually talk with the ruling person right now and secure positions for themselves if this person wins in the coming government, without actually going into the national or bigger table, rather not national but the bigger table of the mountain to negotiate with the West. So it's a very, very heated change right now that is going on in that particular part. And now, interestingly, away from the division as a community, there is now even division politically. Take it away from Rigathi Gachagua in the Ruku and the Kindiki fights, and look at it from the angle that now Honorable Waiguru, who is finishing her second term as a governor, has declared that she will intentionally be doing campaigns for Ruto in all these particular counties that identify with Mount Kenya West. So she mentioned that she will be walking to Kirinyaga, where she's actually the governor right now. She'll be going to Nyeri, she'll be going to Murang'a, she'll be going to Kiambu, she'll be going to Nyandarua, and she'll be going to Laikipia. So these 6 counties that form part of Mount Kenya West somehow are counties that are now the back or the bedrock of Rigathi Gachagua. If the united opposition was actually to consolidate the mountain behind them, then Rigathi Gachagua will be counting on this particular 6 counties from Mount Kenya West without the influence of Kindiki on the other part to deliver that particular win. Now, from that particular background itself, you are seeing a division, an inside division being introduced, of course, with the ruling party right now, the UDA party supporters like Governor Waiguru, who is now saying and asking the people of the mountain that when she comes, the doors be opened for her in all these 6 counties. Now, she intends to take this narrative of Ruto across these counties and divide the votes from Rigathi Gachagua the way she has already begun to do that in her own county. This has 2 effects. One, it has the effect of weakening the united opposition into the major polls of 2027, with their bedrock actually divided and handed over to President Ruto from the east following Kindiki, Ruku and Cecile Mbarire, and from the west following Waiguru, and leaving Rigathi Gachagua with the skeleton of the mountain. But another effect that this has is that it divides both the mountain east and the west for Ruto's favor on who Ruto will pick as, for example, a presidential a presidential running mate in the 2027 polls. For now, it seems like Kindiki is still safe in his seat, but conversations of 2027 are being discussed. And if the mountain that gives Kindiki the total confidence to actually know that if he delivers the mountain in 2027, then he can actually still have conversation with the Ruto stable, is now having the infiltration of Waiguru. Then Waiguru gets to have an advantage of delivering even more votes because of the sizes of the counties that Waiguru is targeting to actually penetrate compared to the sizes of the counties that identify with Kindiki from the very region. Then Waiguru might have even an upper hand in the conversations of the running mate in 2027. So the mountain is divided beyond Rigathi Gachagua right now, and a lot of interest are factored in that particular place. Beyond these political statements is another interesting economic statement. Now that Georgia Farm, Ruiru parts have opened up to be metropolitan states where people come in, buy land from across different communities. Certain leaders from Kiambu County want Kiambu County not to identify with the Mount Kenya region at all. Now, this is not a fight between Mount Kenya East and Mount Kenya West anymore. This is a secession talk where Kiambu now wants to identify as an independent metropolitan, independent out of the Mount Kenya politics. The leaders who have been quoted says now when President Ruto is looking at Kiambu now, and if he forms the next government, then they want President Ruto to look at Kiambu independent of the mountain. What this means is that Kiambu County will now want a representation in the national cake. This includes cabinet secretaries independent of the mountain from Kiambu County as a metropolitan place, and also PS positions and such like things. So this is going to weaken the major bedrock of the united opposition in 2027, and right now it calls upon all of them to go back to the table and work on a reconsolidation procedure of keeping this particular bedrock very, very steady ahead of 2027, failure of which, if Kiambu succeeds to secede from this particular arrangement, for example, and the East secedes from the influence of Rigathi Gachagua and delivers for William Ruto, and from within the chunk remaining out of the 5 counties that will not be the Kiambu County and the eastern counties of the mountain, Rigathi Gachagua still divides the influence with the good governor Waiguru, then the united opposition will only be remaining with the skeleton of the mountain, with a huge chunk of it now already handed over to President William Ruto. You saw the statements now that have been made, including by the Member of Parliament for Gatundu South, Honorable Gigi Kagombe, who has said that from the look in the mountain, Ruto is still going to have an early win. So this is actually a call for anyone who is not in the Ruto's government to pull up their socks, and it's also even a call for Ruto's government to reconsolidate now their strategy and influence over this area and keep their socks up ahead of 2027. But a day in politics might be as big as 1,000 days in an ordinary life, and so anything can happen between now and 2027 that shifts this particular power dynamic either way to the united opposition or to President William Ruto's camp. Away from that, let's take a look quickly, because we've spent so much time on that, on this statement by Sifuna. Now, this attacks has been a subject of like three episodes here at the People's Mirror, when we're just detailing the sequential attack of Ruto Kalonzo as it culminates as what now remains in the scene as two people that the public is saying could be the two main contestants in the 2027 major polls. Now, this thing needs also a different angle to look at it. One is that perhaps this could be the two people remaining for the 2027 major contest. That's okay. And so they have started to fare it out or square it out against themselves early. But another angle is that it could be the smart move of Ruto to single out Kalonzo as the preferred candidate for the united opposition by putting focus on Kalonzo. And so after putting focus on Kalonzo, the united opposition might feel like Kalonzo is the fit candidate that President Ruto fears. But this might be a move to distract the united opposition from real Ruto's challenge, because that way, by putting focus on Kalonzo and destroying or disregarding his political sportsmanship early, he weakens Kalonzo ahead of 2027, that even if the united opposition settle on him in 2027, he will have been a finished Ruto's target. Now, this could be a distraction. If, say, for example, Ruto feared Okengo Matiang'i, or let's say, for example, he feared JB Muturi or Martha Karua or Rigathi Gachagua more than Kalonzo, then he won't attack the person that he fears, because that way he would be measuring his own, political effort against the political effort of someone he fears. So who does he attack? He attacks someone that he fears less and puts clout on that person's name, so that the other principals can focus on that person as maybe the stronger candidate against Ruto. Then they decide on that candidate, then they hand the weakest person for Ruto's team in Ruto's laps for a competition. So it's something that needs to be looked at deeper than it's playing out, that the attack towards Kalonzo might not really mean that Ruto is aware that Kalonzo is a preferred presidential candidate, but might be itself a call from President Ruto's camp to have the united opposition settle on Kalonzo so that they quickly finish with Kalonzo than if it was Okengo Matiang'i or Rigathi or anyone else. But that said, now, these statements that they have been making have been, on these particular roads that were made and the roads that were not made. And Ruto has been faulting Kalonzo for actually not having proper brains, that in 40 years of service, he actually did not deliver any tarmac road or kilometers of tarmac roads to his place. Now, John Yutu responded to this sometimes on live TV, saying that it shows the president's preference of actually putting self-interest over the people's interest. But that did not make headline, because of course John Yutu is already in the united opposition. But when Senator Sifuna tweeted the same thing on his particular Twitter handle, now it has become news, because Senator Sifuna is the Secretary General of the ODM party that is currently in the broad-based arrangement with the UDA party. So when he speaks that the statements of presidents that are supposed to take us to Singapore actually shows a president that prioritizes self-interest over national interest, then of course it sparks news, because this is a part and parcel of the broad-based that should be supporting the president. But now Sifuna has said that these statements are actually not right, because he says in his tweet that he would have preferred if a tarmac road would be made to his village, yes, but if it's not a national priority, then he does not see why he would make a tarmac road to his place over a national priority budgeting. And now people are saying that Sifuna defending Kalonzo heightens or echoes more on the sounds that the united opposition might be receiving a huge chunk of the ODM party if Kalonzo becomes their presidential flag bearer. Again, a conversation that narrows down to the contest between Kalonzo and Ruto, and in the eyes of the public score, let us know down in the comments how they are doing so far. It's been a pleasure recapping this for you here at the People's Mirror. Until our next episode.